I'm going to talk about additional things about the pro forma statements and the forecasting. So the first thing is about uncertainty. So in the RNA's case, we have assumed several things, believing in that those will happen really in the future. However, in reality, things can go wrong, and sometimes you can have wrong assumptions which was found later. So we have to cope with those uncertainties because we cannot predict the future perfectly, and there are several ways to do. They are sensitivity analysis, scenario analysis, and simulation. So I'm just going to briefly mention them. So in a broader sense, in any kind of analysis, sensitivity analysis can be thought as the following. So sensitivity analysis is to examine how a target variable will change if an input variable changes. So there are two variables, two things, two factors. So mathematical term, the target variable is y and input variable is x. Okay, so you often write a function such as y equals function of x. So when input variable changes, the target variable also changes. For example, in our case, because we are writing the pro forma statements, the target variable will be EFN, the one thing that we want to know from the analysis. And there are several factors that can affect the EFN, such as the predicted sales or the cost of goods sold and other things as well. So there are multiple input variables. But in this sensitivity analysis, we pick one of input variable and we think about how much it will affect the target variable. So for example, we can, in the RNA supplier's case, we can focus on the growth rate of the sales. And then we make different assumptions about the change in the future. In the original case, we assumed that the sales will grow 25%. However, now we want to know what if an alternative thing happens? So we assume that what if the growth of sale is only 15%, and we calculate the EFN again to see whether this assumption is critical to our result or not. So if making this assumption is very critical to our result, that means we have to be more precise on making these assumptions. For example, we can make more precise estimates for the growth, or we can rely on more other techniques to measure the sales growth in the future. And also, so that's for that reason we often do sensitivity analysis, and we find whether it can be very sensitive to our result. And the second thing is scenario analysis. So while sensitivity analysis focus on each input variable's effect, the scenario analysis is more thinking about the environment or circumstances. So this is about thinking about the different situations that can happen in the future. So for example, as we are suffering now, we can think that what will be the case if inflation problem becomes much worse and suddenly there is a rise in the subsequent there's a rise in the interest rate, or we can think about the economic recession case. In that case, maybe their sales will not grow as much as 25%, but actually they can have a reduction in sales. And also we can think about the case where there's another pandemic, not COVID-19, but other disease. So we can think about alternative futures. And then we do the analysis again so that we can prepare these alternative scenarios. And finally, there are simulations. So simulations are basically oriented for the purpose of military. So when they are trying to prepare for the war. So thanks to the development of the computer technology, now we are able to calculate a lot of calculations in a relatively short period of time. So simulation means that you are going to make a virtual world, which is very similar to reality. However, it is more simplified version. And then you are going to run several repeated calculations for the virtual world so that you can obtain the result. And then you make a distribution such as like this so that you can have an idea where on average what's the situation and what are the outliers, and we can, for example, we can make a confidence level statistically so that we can be confident for our results from the analysis. Okay, and so far we have talked about the pro forma statement approach. So we are trying to write the balance sheet in the future and also income statement in the future. However, because we have also cash flow statement, we can just focus on the cash flow itself. And this approach is called cash flow forecasting. So contrary to the pro forma statement, it is a method that you focus on the amount of cash you have to spend and the amount of money you have, and then you calculate the difference between them two, the two difference, and then you call it the external funding needed. So there are some sources of cash, the where you can obtain the cash, and there are uses of cash where you need to spend them. And then by comparing them, you can get an idea how much you need more. And then it will be the external funding needed. So therefore, in this approach, external funding needed will be the difference between the predicted use of cash minus predicted source of cash. But this is not often used in reality, so we are just going to look at it once and then we are going to forget about it. But one thing that you can understand is actually the results from the cash flow forecast will be the same as the pro forma statements whenever you have the same assumptions. So if you make a proper assumptions, those two approaches will give you the same results. So you can just rely on the pro forma statements for your safety. So here is an example. So the textbook writer had gave us the cash flow forecast for RNE's case. And there are sources of cash, where you can obtain cash, and the use of cash, where you need to spend them. And according to the author, source of cash of the RNE is 658, and the use of cash is 2080. So again, this difference will give you $1,422,000, which is the same as we obtained from pro forma statements. So whatever you use, we get the same result. This is very intuitive because if you do not make mistakes when you write down the balance sheet, income statement, and the cash flow statements. They all should have a consistent information. They should match each other. So it is very it is obvious that these two will give you the same conclusion.